Welcome to a video entitled Spawning Threads. And I'm going to talk about threads a little bit here and do the absolute simplest multi-thread application you've ever seen. But this will help you get an idea of how to work with the thread, and then you can kind of start to think about how to expand the program from there and manage the thread. Now, tasks with the potential of holding up other tasks can be made to execute on separate threads. Now, there are a number of options when you're using multi-threading in C#. And Microsoft has some really cool new things out there. First of all, the most difficult, you can create and manage your threads manually. That's what we're going to do in just a second, but the easy way. There's also the background worker class, and this manages a separate thread dedicated to processing a method that you specify. Then there's the task parallel library, and then there's something called async and await, which we're going to talk about that and show you that a little bit later on. Now, the task parallel library is a set of public types and APIs in the system threading and system threading task namespaces that's designed to simplify this whole process of adding parallelism and concurrency to applications, and we'll talk about all that a bit later on. So let's just look at a simple multi-thread example. So what I'm going to do is jump out into Visual Studio. Notice I've created a new project called Spanning Threads. We're going to do a Windows Form application, and we'll just click OK and let this thing open up, and we're just going to put a couple of buttons on a form, and we're going to use message boxes to see the way these threads are behaving. Now, notice I'm going to go into the toolbox here, let it wake up and give me my things. I'll double click for a button one time and double click for a button again, and that gives me my two buttons, okay? Now let's go to the code behind on button 1. And I'm just going to put a message box here. Message box dot show. And we'll just say this is the first message box. Okay? Pretty straightforward, right? Then we'll go back to our form, double click on button 2, and we're going to put another message box. Okay? So I'll just copy this, paste it right here. Now, notice if I run this right now, you know what's going to happen, right? Once I click button 1 and this message box pops up, I can't click button 2 yet until I've satisfied this one. So once I satisfy this one, now I can click button 2. What if we execute one on a separate thread? Let's watch what happens, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and move it into another method, because I'm going to execute this method on a separate thread, okay? So I'll just do private void message box 1, okay? And then notice I'm going to take this and put it right down here, okay? So what we want to do is kick this one off. So here's the way we're going to do that. We're going to use system.threading.thread. We just call it T for the new thread. So we're creating a variable of T of type system.threading thread. Set it equal to a new system.threading.thread. And notice we're going to pass it message box 1. Okay? And then we're going to call T and start. Okay? So when we click on button 1, we're going to spawn a new thread. And then we're going to point that thread at message box 1 method, and then we're going to start the thread. And so the message box will fire, but it will be spawned on a new thread, and then our main execution thread is still right here, and we click button 2, we'll open this message box on that. Okay, so we'll click start here, and this time it'll go a little bit different. Notice I click on button 1, that started a new thread. This is the first message box. Now notice if I click button 2, I can now open the second one. Why? These are running on separate threads, and I can close them however I would like. Notice if I open button 2 first, I didn't spawn a new thread. I now can't hit button 1. Okay, so I'll first have to hit button 1. Let me close this and restart it. So I'll restart it. Notice if I hit button 1, I spawn a thread, kick that one off, and then I can hit button 2 and play with it. Okay, so build this simple little example. Notice on our threads we have a lot of methods that we can work with the thread, a lot of methods and properties. Notice priority, resume, set apartment state, start, suspend, Notice there's a lot here. Okay, I can check to see if it's alive, if it's background, if it's a thread pool thread, and so forth. So a lot can happen with these threads. Very simple example here. Hope this helps you to kind of get your ideas around how threads are going to work. Now, it's going to get much, much more complicated than this by the time you ever build a threaded program, okay? But again, that's outside the scope of the exam, but I want to help you get your head around this as we talk about the other threading functionalities in C#.